You're listening to the Home and Outdoor Living Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Garcia, and my goal is to educate you on various home living topics and provide you with actionable steps to take in your projects. If you're a homeowner, you're in the right place. On to today's episode. Welcome back to the Home and Outdoor Living Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Garcia, and today we've got an awesome topic for you guys. So today I want to dive into all about shade structures. And first I want to start with what do I mean by shade structure? In the landscape, there's many different shade structures, and essentially it's a structure that's going to give you some type of shade from the sun and some overhead coverage from rain potentially, and maybe even snow. I don't know. It depends how you want to use the space. So today we're going to dissect the most common options that are on the market right now. There are some highly customizable versions of all of these, so we're not really going to cover that. However, we're not going to cover what you can readily find or hire to have built for you. So with no further ado, we're going to dive into the screen here and show you what we've got. So on the screen, we've got what we would normally find, and that is simply a umbrella. And so in this example, I actually have something very similar to this. You've got the umbrella. This is probably a 10-foot umbrella, maybe an 8-foot, might be a little bit small, but I'm going to assume it's a 10-foot because of the weight that's here. And in this case, it's over a small dining area. Now, you notice where the shade footprint, right? It's only going to be as big as the umbrella. And so if you do get this umbrella, this model will do a full 360 turn. I would do recommend an umbrella that can turn 360. The reason for that is because the sun position is going to move on you. And if you're like me and you don't want the sun in your eyes or on you 24/7 as you're in the yard, you'll want to move it. And so you'll notice here that actually half the area is being covered. And in order to cover the full area in this image, if you're listening to the podcast, check out the YouTube page for the video here. You would have to actually place it a little bit further out to the right in order to cover the other thing. So that's the downside of umbrellas, is that it's only as good as its footprint. And so if it's not movable, you're going to be quite limited. So you better be able to put it in the right position if you can't move it. Otherwise, invest in a model where it can turn 360, give you really good coverage. With that in mind, if it's going to be 360 moving around, often you're going to need 10 to 15 feet of free space so that you can swing it all the way around. Okay. So otherwise, they're a great option. And they can, work for many people. This is another example. This is showing over a lounge set. Again, same principle. This one will turn 360, almost identical to the one that I've got. This looks like more like the 10-footer one. The other one looks like more like 8. And so when the sun's directly over the umbrella, yes, you're going to get maximum coverage. Otherwise, the sun's going to move. You're going to want to move that with it. Now, I'll tell you from personal experience with these guys is that in the early morning or the late evening, if you've got really like sunrise sun or sunset sun, the umbrella is going to basically become useless, right? Because the sun angle is going to penetrate from the side, and it's not going to do much until the full sunrise or full sunset has happened. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's move on to the next one. All right, super popular, really trending these days, the shade sail. Now you can get these at the big box stores. So, usually they're in the smaller models. They're not as the commercial grade, so you might have to go to a high-end furniture store to get these in a good quality, but essentially you can basically set them up anywhere. You'll see in the image that's on the screen here, they've got clips onto the east trough of the house, and looks like in this case there's 2 posts on either side of the patio that they're restrained to. Now you can add this to pre-existing posts, you can add it to the house, you can add it to structures. It's really easy to set up. Probably would cost you just as much as like a really good umbrella, right? So a really good umbrella, you know, from a big box store will range anywhere from $500 to $1,000. A commercial grade umbrella could range you $2,000 to $3,000. And shade sails are going to be in that same price range, right? So depending if you get your own posts in, or if you don't need posts at all, you're going to hook it up to pre-existing structures. You know, you're probably going to be in that 500 to 1,000 range. If you got to get the posts in and you want to do it up nice and have a good feel, you know, you might range up from there, but max 3,000, right? So both of these options are going to be in that $500 to $3,000 range. Can basically fit any outdoor living budget, whether you're in the DIY category or where you're in the professionally crafted category. They can be great options. Again, umbrellas, different sizes, shapes, colors. Same with the sails. Primarily, you're going to see them in these triangles. I guess because of the way that they got to hook up, anything bigger and they tend to get dragged around with wind because they are up there permanently. Whereas the umbrella, you're going to retract when you're not using it, so it's not at risk to wind damage or falling over or breaking. Whereas the sails, you're not going to take them down. So they do have to be quite resilient to wind, and so normally you're going to see them in that triangle shape. Here's another example. In this case, it's being used over a pool lounge set. The lady here is, of course, probably just finished swimming, now reading a magazine, enjoying some shade. You're going to see the footprint in this image. The footprint of the sail is probably the same dimensions of the sail, if not smaller. Generally, the farther away it is from you and towards the sun, you know, you're going to get a smaller footprint, right? So keep that in mind, right? In this case, you can see, you know, this is probably a 10-foot wide triangle, and, you know, it just barely covers 2 lounge chairs, right? So keep that in mind when you're considering that option. All right, so we're going to move on to a very popular and traditional option in terms of shade structures. So what we have here in front of us is a unstained cedar pergola, right? So most deck builders, most fence builders are going to have this as an option for you if they have a good craftsman on their team. They can pretty much do it either with the traditional rails. You know, in this case, they've got the kind of the crown molding at the bottom of it to probably hide the brackets that are there. In this case, it's installed on top of a concrete patio, and concrete patios are really good for retrofit in the sense that generally when you have just a 4x4, 4-inch by 4-inch post, which I believe this one does, it's mounted right to the concrete. Now you go 6x6 posts or up, generally you'll see pergolas 6x6, 8x8, 10x10. Not much will you see bigger than that. The thicker the post, the more elaborate you can get with it, the more safe and secure it is. Also, the more beefier that the actual design looks. So generally you get a higher quality feel from the bigger posts. But I'm going to assume that this is mounted to the concrete because I don't see anything otherwise. Unless it was installed with the concrete patio, there may be footings underneath the patio, right? So essentially when a pergola is built for the posts, it's sitting on top of a concrete footing of some sort. So generally it's going to be, probably with a sonotube, and they're 4 feet long. They're in the ground to make sure that they're, below the freeze line if you're in a winter climate. And so that's probably the case here. Again, this is unstained. So this is probably brand new in this picture. If it remains unstained or not cleaned every year, which you probably won't clean it and not stain it, but if that does happen, it will discolor over time and oxidize. So it won't stay this brown, nice color without cleaning and staining regularly, within the 2 to 3 year time span, 2 to 4 years time span, sorry. Unstained cedar pergolas in your market in North America, they can range. You could see them anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 is usually the average range for just a traditional set with 4x4 or 6x6 posts, and then an assortment for your rails and your joists on top. In this case, it's over a dining area. So a pergola like this, where it doesn't have a solid top, it's going to have filtered lighting, right? So you're still going to get sunlight to come through, especially if it's directly over top, but it will filter the light out. So it'll make the sunlight less harsh on those sitting underneath it, okay? Now, again, this is permanent. So generally you want to make it bigger than the space, as big as possible. You can see they almost brought it to the edge of your pool, which is fantastic because they're maximizing the space that the shade structure is going to cover, okay? Because again, when the sun's going to be at an angle, it's going to penetrate more of the area, right? And so you're almost losing space. So bigger, the better you can on the pergolas. Knowing that, that can affect cost for sure, but you're not going to redo it. Once you're going to do it, it's done once. It's going to be there 20, 30, 40, 50 years. After that, it's probably going to get replaced at some point. And so you just want to do it once. You don't want to do it over. It's leave a bitter taste in your mouth. All right, so here's another edition of a pergola, right? So this could be in cedar, but what you'll notice is automatically these posts are either 6x6 or 8x8. They look like 8x8 to me from the photo. And the joists are bigger, more rafters in there. They even got the slat boards on the very top. And you can just feel like this is much more sturdy. Has a lot more presence, a lot more character in the landscape when you compare it to everything else, right? You have to remember that often your dining space or your living space is going to be next to your home more often than not. And when that is the case, without a substantially sized shade structure, the space is going to feel really small compared to the house. So this shade structure is almost breaking up the visual aspect from the house and making it feel like its own little living room in the overall grand scheme of the property, right? So in a project like this, the living space is not just inside anymore; it's outside, and so we want it to be proportionate to the inside of the home, right? So this outdoor kitchen in this image and this shade structure is probably pretty proportionate to the kitchen that's actually inside the home, right? So guests arrive inside, they see the kitchen, they walk out, you're going out on a summer day, there's continuity in the space, right? And so that's one thing to consider. Again, you can see the difference. This is stained, of course. This is a stained pergola in this case. Vertical surfaces on a stained wood surface are going to last around 5 years before they need to be reapplicated if you use a good stain and the preparation was done well. And on horizontal surfaces and in colder climates where you have snow and ice, UV rays, rain, they're all going to break down that area a lot faster, right? So at the 2 to 3 year mark, you're already going to see the stain wear away, and it's going to have to be restained. Okay. For this upgraded version of a pergola, depending on a couple different factors like what stain's being used, what type of wood's being used, and the size of it, generally you're going to see them start at $12,000. And I mean, it's not uncommon for it to range up to $20,000 depending on size, but that would be the average range, $12,000 to $20,000 for something like this. One little quick add-on that can be done to either the unstained cedar pergola or the premium wood stained version is you can add a shade sail on it. And in this example, there's a very tiny pergola, but I just want to illustrate the sail. The sail is actually mounted on the roof line of the pergola, and there is a track on either side of the pergola. So this sail will actually retract and open. Notice in the image below, a lot more filtering has happened with a feature like this. I'd say 80% of it is shaded underneath, whereas the other slat like Pergola, you might only get like maybe a 30 or 40% filtering at best, or shading at best. But you add in the shade sail and you can maximize it, especially on a clear sky, noon hour day on a Saturday, you're outside. Or there's light rain, you can close that and still enjoy that space. Now, of course, if it's downpour, it's not going to do much probably. So I say light rain, it's like misting kind of thing. It would still make the space enjoyable. And so this is an add-on. You can essentially add it onto any pergola structure, regardless of size or anything like that, because it's not like a huge endeavor. But again, it does have to be installed properly. So whether you get a DIY kit, which I don't think really exists, but you could certainly get the materials and then install it. So that brings us to our next option here. So what you're looking at on the screen here is a pavilion. So this is a pergola. The posts look like pergola, except the roof line is completely shingled. Okay, so nothing can get in here. So in this example, it's over a concrete patio. The posts have stone pillars on them, and underneath is hosting a fireplace. Now, this is extremely good for extending the season on that patio. Well, what do I mean by that? In early spring and late fall, you can still hang out there regardless of rain or shine, regardless snowing or not, especially you have a fireplace there, will warm up the space. And so you can hang out there really regardless of what precipitation is happening, whether it's precipitation is happening or not. And that's the true benefit in the pavilion, is that spring, summer, and fall, you can hang out in that space and it doesn't matter what's going on with the weather. If it's cold, that's where you're going to want a fireplace or some kind of fire pit in that area to really maximize it. But yeah, certainly precipitation doesn't matter. If you got a fire pit or fireplace in there, or even a space heater, you could do a commercial space heater in there. Anyone can buy one. And you could enjoy that space, and either watching all the trees and plants come into bloom in the spring, or, watching the fall color and all the trees and plants. So it's definitely a great option, especially over an eating area. Often I had this conversation all the time, is one of the things that people seem to miss the most when they're designing the outdoor living space is that they don't seem to question the fact that there's no umbrella, no pergola, no pavilion planned in the project. But they're planning a dining area. Well, I don't know about you, but I guess I can't put a name to it unless I do a survey. But I certainly don't like eating in the direct sun, and that's probably the biggest problem. When someone goes to eat, you go to a park or anything, you're trying to find a tree with shade in it, unless you're a real person for the sun. So again, the pavilion, it's a great spot, for something like this over a dining area or even a lounge area. In this application with the fireplace, the price ranges for pavilions can range quite greatly, just depending on your area and I guess all the amenities, right? Because in this case, you can have electrical, you can have a fan in it, you can have light switches, depending on size, right? So usually it's going to start at the top end of the pergola rate, which is around 20,000, more or less, could be a little bit less, and then on average 20 to 30, right? Now again, there's exceptions to this rule. It can be smaller, not as refined materials, like maybe just regular cedar and unstained, right? In this case, this image that we're looking at is stained. So it could be a little bit less than that, and it could be a little bit more if it's a little more elaborate and much bigger. But based on what we're looking at here, in this case, it's probably like a 12 by 16 foot pavilion. That's probably what you're looking at. So we'll move on here, and this is going to be our last option. This is a covered porch or a covered patio. Essentially, what we're looking at here in this image, for those of you on the podcast, we are looking at essentially an addition of the home where the roof line has been carried out and it's shingled on top, but it's a much sound structure. Often it will mimic the house, right? So you'll see vinyl on the edges and that kind of thing. In many ways, it's the old traditional sense of a sunroom. And so it's a full-on addition to the home. In this example, it's open-faced, so the sides are open. And in this case, a deck is built with it, and it has steps down to a paver patio. There's also a fireplace built into it with a TV mounted. This is a great outdoor room. Now, you'll see some variations of this where the sides are covered by screens or by glass. And so that it'd be a full-on like sunroom at that point. But again, this is for those that want that covered area right outside the home. That's how the design is working. Rather than the pavilion, it's off on its own. This is the covered porch, the covered patio. It's right off the house. So you come out the patio doors, the roof line's attached right to the side of the house. You come out, it's just like you're walking in another room. Especially if this is a closed-in room. Now we've got like these glass systems where you can open them up in the summer and completely close them in the winter and enjoy this, four seasons room essentially at that point year round. Which I don't know about you, but for me, I love these spaces. Have best of both worlds. You have the full weather protection, and then you can open it up or leave it open, for the summer season. Personally, if this was my space in the summer, instead of turning a movie on inside in the living room for everybody to watch, we'd be coming out here and turning it on. This is just a one-of-a-kind space for those that really are kind of homebodies and would prefer to be at home, especially in the summertime, and you're a sports fan or you're into movies or shows and that want to spend that quality time with friends and family. This is an awesome space. It's definitely worth the money. What does a space like this cost? It can vary greatly because the material choices are quite different. Of course, there's electrical, there's structural. You're going to need permits to get this done. It's essentially an addition. In this case, it's built on a deck. Sometimes there's a concrete veranda already there on the home or concrete porch that you're building on top of. So that saves some cost. So this is a wild card. There's a lot of factors in this one, more so than the others. So you could easily see it. I'd say the minimum you're ever going to see it is $20,000, and that would be a stretch. So I'm going to say that the starting point is going to be about $25,000, and you could easily see this get up to $40,000, depending on the final. Does it include the fireplace? Is there a porch already? Is there not a porch? So you're going to build a deck, or you're going to build a raised patio. What are the material finishes inside? How much craftsmanship's got to be done? So I wouldn't be unsurprised by that if it was the top end was 40, and if it even went beyond that, especially once you add lighting and all that good stuff in there. So that would be a great idea there. And essentially, those are really the options. So to recap, you have your umbrellas, you have your shade sails, you have your pergolas, the unstained cedar. Sometimes they even build out of pressure treated, but I really wouldn't recommend that. The quality of pressure treated just isn't as good as the cedar. You can hear a lot of differences on that, but that's just my opinion. The stained, premium wood, very beefy, very substantial pergola. Your shade sail add-ons to pergolas, your covered pergolas, which we refer to them as pavilions, and your covered porches or patios. So when it comes to shade structures, I'd say that's 99% of your options. There might be a couple of different options there or variations of these. These are just images that I found on Google. So if you do a quick search of those titles, these images will pop up for you. I hope that demystifies the shade structures a little bit for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And of course, if this is of interest to you, reach out to your local deck, fence, or outdoor living space builder, and they'd be happy to chat about building one of these for you. We'll see you guys next time. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. If you found value in this episode, you can support us for free by subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast. See you next time.